The rain hammered against the windshield of James Sullivan's patrol car as he turned onto Elmwood Lane, the wipers struggling to keep pace with the deluge. His uniform clung stiffly to his frame, still crisp despite the grueling 12-hour shift he'd just endured. It had been a day from hell paperwork that multiplied like weeds, a tense standoff with a knife-wielding shoplifter that nearly ended in bloodshed, and a department-wide meeting about looming budget cuts that left his temples pulsing. All he wanted was to collapse onto his worn leather couch, crack open a beer, and let the exhaustion bleed out of him. But as he pulled into his driveway, that dream evaporated. His truck, a beat-up but reliable Ford he'd owned for a decade, was gone. In its place sat a hulking tow truck, its yellow lights flashing mockingly through the storm, and standing beside it was a man James recognized all too well, Victor Hensley, the neighborhood's self-appointed tyrant. Victor wasn't just any HOA enforcer. He was a caricature of petty power, the kind of guy who'd fine you for breathing too loudly if he could justify it on clipboard. James had seen him in action before berating an elderly widow for a chipped mailbox, issuing a $200 fine to a single mom whose kid had left a tricycle in the yard overnight. Once, he'd even tried to have a teenager's basketball hoop removed because it disrupted the aesthetic harmony. Now, here he was, arms crossed, smirking like he'd just caught James red-handed in some grand conspiracy. Behind him, the tow truck driver, a wiry guy with a patchy beard, leaned against the vehicle, scrolling his phone, oblivious to the brewing storm beyond the weather. James killed the engine and stepped out into the rain, his boots splashing in the pooling water. His badge gleamed faintly under the streetlight, still clipped to his belt. He forced his voice to stay level, though every muscle in his body screamed to let loose. "Victor, you want to explain why my truck's gone and your rig's blocking my driveway?" Victor barely looked up from his clipboard, flipping a page with theatrical slowness. "Should have paid the fine, Sullivan. Rules are rules." His tone dripped with condescension, the kind that made James's blood simmer. "What fine?" James asked, his pulse ticking upward. He hadn't seen a single Notissino letters, no emails, nothing. He'd been buried in work all day, barely able to check his phone, let alone sift through HOA nonsense. Victor's smirk widened, and he tilted his head like he was explaining something to a child. "Unpaid balance of due, La, 89. We sent notices. You ignored them. No payment, no warning needed." He tapped the clipboard with his pen, as if that settled it. James clenched his jaw, inhaling slowly through his nose to keep from snapping. He'd dealt with the HOA's petty citations before once for a trash can left out 10 minutes past pickup, another time for a port share that wasn't regulation color. He'd always paid up, grumbled, and moved on. But this was different. This was personal. He pulled out his phone, rain streaking the screen as he scrolled through his inbox. Sure enough, buried beneath a flood of spam and work emails, there it was, a final notice sent at 3:17 p.m. That afternoon, less than 4 hours ago. He held it up, his voice cutting through the rain. "You towed my truck over to due, lot 89, before I even had a chance to see this? Then parked this monstrosity here to rub it in?" Victor shrugged, unfazed. "That's about the size of it." James ran a hand down his face, water dripping from his fingers. He'd faced down armed felons with less arrogance than this guy. "Move the truck," he said, his tone flat but edged with steel. Victor held up a hand, shaking his head with mock regret. "Can't do that, buddy. Policy says you settle the fine first." That was it. James's patience shattered like glass under a hammer. He yanked his phone back out and dialed dispatch, his eyes neverly vying Victor's smug face. The line rang once before a familiar voice crackled through. "Dispatch, Officer Torres speaking." "Sullivan here," James said, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest. "I need a traffic obstruction unit at my address. Now." Victor's smirk faltered just for a second. The tow truck driver glanced up from his phone, eyeing James's badge with sudden interest. "Wait, you a cop?" he muttered, straightening. Victor scoffed, while vying a hand dismissively. "Doesn't matter. This is HOA jurisdiction. Cops can't touch us." James ignored him, walking to his mailbox and flipping it open. Inside, soaked but intact, was a physical notice. He skimmed it, his gut twisting as he read. Effective immediately. Additional violations applied. Total due. Due loss 600. The list was absurd, unapproved, porch light wattage. Grass height exceeds 3.5 inches. Unauthorized mailbox decoration. His mailbox was plain steel, except for a faded, thin blue-line sticker he'd slapped on years ago after a fallen colleague's funeral. He held it up, rainwater smudging the ink. "This your idea of unauthorized decoration, Victor?" Victor's grin returned, sharper now. "Oh yes, Sullivan. You've got fine stacking up. This is just the beginning. You homeowners think you run this place, but we do." James's expression didn't shift, but his mind raced. He'd spent his career dismantling bully street thugs, dirty cops, you name it. Victor Hensley was no different, just a smaller fish in a shallower pond. "You run this neighborhood?" he asked, his voice low, almost curious. Victor nodded, puffing out his chest. "That's right. Better get used to it." James exhaled, tilting his head. "Got it." He paused, letting the silence hang, then raised a hand as red and blue lights pierced the darkness. 2 squad cars rolled up, tires hissing on the wet pavement. A third vehicle followed, a sleek black sedan that screamed authority. Officers spilled out, led by Lieutenant Carla Hayes, a no-nonsense veteran with a stare that could melt steel. She scanned the scene, rain beating on her cap. "What's the situation, Sullivan?" Victor's confidence wavered as James gestured to the tow truck. "This vehicle's obstructing my property. My truck's been towed without notice over a fine I didn't even have time to see. And now I've got due loss 600 in new violations for things like a sticker on my mailbox." Hayes turned to Victor, her voice all business. "You got a permit for that tow?" Victor fumbled with his clipboard, rain soaking the pages. "It's HOA policy. We don't need. Policy isn't law." Hayes cut in, her tone sharp. "You need city authorization to impound a vehicle. Show me the paperwork." Victor's mouth opened, then closed. The tow truck driver shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "I just follow orders, man." James stepped closer to Victor, his voice dropping. "Where's my truck?" Victor swallowed, his bravado crumbling. "Impound lot. You can get it back after you pay. After I pay due loss 600 for a sticker and some grass." James interrupted, his laugh short and bitter. "Try again." Before Victor could respond, the black sedan's door opened, and out stepped Marcus Ellison, the HOA board president. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed despite the weather, with the polished air of a used car salesman turned dictator. He adjusted his coat, flashing a tight smile. "Officer Sullivan, let's not escalate this. I'm sure we can resolve any misunderstanding." James didn't smile back. "No misunderstanding, Marcus. Your enforcer here towed my truck illegally, blocked my driveway, and hit me with fake fines. Which part of that's unclear." Marcus's expression tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "The HOA has every right to enforce community standards. If there's an issue, we can address it at the next meeting." "No," James said, crossing his arms. "We're addressing it now. Because as of this moment, I'm opening an investigation into HOA misconduct." Marcus's jaw twitched, but he recovered fast. "That's a bold claim, Sullivan. You'll need EVY dense serial, EVY densito back it up." James smirked. "Funny you mentioned that. I made some calls." As if on cue, the rumble of engines echoed down the street. 3 more black SUVs pulled up, disgorging a team of city auditors and fraud investigators. A woman in a crisp blazer, Lydia Tran, head of the city's financial oversight unit, stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Marcus Ellison?" she asked, her voice cutting through the rain. Marcus froze, his polish slipping. "Yes. We've received multiple complaints about HOA financial irregularities," Tran continued, unfazed by the weather. "Selective enforcement, illegal seizures, and questionable fund allocation. We're launching a full audit of your records effective immediately." The crowd that had started to gather, neighbors drawn by the lights, and commotion, murmured in shock. Mrs. Alvarez, A retiree who'd been fined for her rose bushes stepped forward, arms crossed. So you're saying they've been stealing from us? Tran nodded, not looking up from her notes. If the EVY Denke holds, yes. Every illegal fine will be refunded. The murmurs turned to cheers. Mr. Kim, a quiet man who'd lost his car to a similar tow last year, shouted, "They threatened to leave my house over a cracked walkway." Others chimed in stories of Christmas lights, doghouses, even a bird feeder deemed non-compliant. Marcus's face was a mask of barely contained rage. He rounded on Victor, his voice a hiss. "Fix this, Hensley. Now." Victor, drenched and shaking, stammered, "Two can't. It's too late." James watched the chaos unfold, satisfaction warming his chest despite the cold rain. He turned to Marcus, his tone calm but lethal. "You want to control? Ellison, now you're losing it." Marcus sneered, stepping closer. "You think you're a hero, Sullivan? You're tearing down the only thing keeping this place from turning into a slum." James didn't flinch. "No, I'm tearing down a racket that's been bleeding people dry. You did this to yourself." Tran's voice cut through again. "Mr. Ellison, care to explain why do law 50,000 in HOA dues ended up in a shell company under your name?" She held up a bank statement, rain beating on the plastic sleeve. "Looks like embezzlement to me." The crowd erupted, fury and vindication colliding. Marcus's composure shattered, his voice rising. "That's a mistake. A clerical error. For 3 years straight." Tran shot back, eyebrow raised. "We'll see." Hay stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "Marcus Ellison, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and illegal property seizures." The cuffs clicked, and the crowd roared, some cheering, others snapping photos. Victor, desperate, turned to James. "What about me?" "I'll talk, I'll tell you everything." James studied him, then nodded. "Start talking, Hensley. Might buy you some leniency." As Marcus was loaded into the squad car, he glared at James, spitting, "This isn't over." James met his eyes, unflinching. "It is for you." The rain slowed as the auditors tore through the HOA office, uncovering a web of corruption that stretched back years. By morning, the fines were voided, refunds promised, and the HOA itself teetered on dissolution. Neighbors gathered, swapping stories and shaking James's hand. "Mrs. Alvarez grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. "Neighborhood hero." James laughed, exhaustion settling in. "Just doing my job." But as he finally sank onto his couch that night, truck back in the driveway, he knew it was more than that. It was justice straw, messy, and long overdue. And for the first time in years, Elmwood Lane felt like a community again. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.